I have always believed that respect is something you earn slowly and lose in a single moment. For most of my life, I guarded it carefully, through my marriage, my motherhood, and the quiet dignity that comes with age. When my daughter married, I felt relief more than joy. She was safe, loved, settled. Her husband seemed attentive, polite, the kind of man who looked you in the eyes when you spoke. I trusted him without hesitation. That trust would become my greatest mistake. He started visiting often, sometimes alone, sometimes with my daughter. At first, it felt comforting to have company in a house that had grown too silent. My husband was gone, my days repetitive. Conversation filled the empty hours. We talked about ordinary things, work, weather, memories. Nothing improper. Nothing alarming. Or so I told myself. Looking back, I can trace the shift to the smallest details. How he lingered in conversations, how his attention stayed on me even when my daughter spoke, how silence between us felt heavier than it should have. I dismissed the feeling immediately. I reminded myself of who I was to him. I told myself that imagination grows reckless when loneliness settles in. I focused on routine, on prayer, on discipline. Still, I noticed how he remembered things about me that others forgot. The way he asked if I had eaten. The way his voice softened when he said my name. None of it crossed a line. Yet it pressed against one. That the first time discomfort truly settled in was during an ordinary afternoon. My daughter had stepped out briefly, leaving the two of us alone. We spoke about her, about how happy he made her, about the future they were planning. Then he said something that didn't belong in the conversation. It wasn't crude. It wasn't dramatic. It was honest in a way that felt dangerous. He said he admired my strength, my presence, the calm I carried. The way he looked at me when he said it made my chest tighten. That I corrected him quickly, firmly. I reminded him of boundaries, of family, of what was appropriate. He apologized without argument. But the air between us changed. The apology didn't erase what had already been revealed. Once a truth is spoken aloud, it doesn't return to silence. That night I couldn't sleep. His words replayed in my mind, not because I welcomed them, but because I feared what they awakened in me. I felt ashamed before anything had even happened. Ashamed that I had noticed. Ashamed that a part of me felt seen after years of invisibility. I prayed for the feeling to disappear, convinced it would fade if ignored. I avoided being alone with him. I kept conversations short. Yet every interaction carried a weight I could no longer deny. That he had made his desire clear, even if he hadn't said the word. And in that moment, I understood something that frightened me more than temptation itself. This was no longer about him alone. It was about what I would choose to do with the knowledge I now carried. After that day, I changed my behavior in ways only I noticed. I answered messages later than usual. I made excuses to cut visits short. When my daughter invited us both over, I made sure other people were present. On the surface, everything looked the same. Inside, I was constantly alert, measuring every word, every glance. I told myself this was control, that this was me protecting my family. But control is harder to maintain when your thoughts betray you in silence. He respected the distance at first. Or at least he appeared to. He became quieter, more careful. Yet his restraint only made things worse. There was something heavier in his pauses, something unresolved in the way he avoided my eyes and then looked back as if drawn against his will. I could sense the struggle in him, and instead of comforting me, it unsettled me deeply. I didn't want to be the cause of anyone's weakness, especially not his. Then came the messages. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing I could point to and call wrong. Simple questions. Small updates. Polite concern. That made them harder to shut down. Ignoring him felt cruel. Responding felt dangerous. I convinced myself that kindness did not equal permission. I reminded myself that maturity meant staying composed even when others faltered. Still, each reply lingered longer in my thoughts than it should have. What disturbed me most was how easily he spoke about feeling alone. About pressure. About expectations he felt he couldn't voice elsewhere. I never encouraged it, but I listened. And listening became its own betrayal. I knew better. I knew emotional doors, once opened, rarely close cleanly. Yet part of me justified it by telling myself that I was only offering guidance, that I was being a steady presence. The truth was harder to face. I liked being needed at a tea night. Guilt settled into my chest like a weight. I imagined my daughter's face, her trust so absolute it bordered on innocence. I asked myself how I could even entertain these thoughts when she had given me nothing but love. The answer frightened me because it had nothing to do with her and everything to do with me. I was lonely. I was aging. I had spent years being strong for others without anyone noticing the quiet emptiness it left behind. He never crossed the line openly again, but the tension lived in what he didn't say, in the way he paused before leaving, in the restraint that felt rehearsed. Once during a brief moment alone, he looked at me and said he was trying to do the right thing. His voice shook when he said it. I told him he had no choice but to do the right thing. The words sounded firm, but my heart betrayed me by pounding too fast. I hated myself for that reaction. I hated that my body responded before my conscience could intervene. I spent days afterward punishing myself with distance and silence. I told myself this would end if I was disciplined enough. But desire does not disappear simply because it is unwelcome. It waits. It tests patience. It looks for cracks. The crack came quietly. A moment when I should have walked away, ended the conversation, protected everyone involved. Instead, I stayed. I listened longer than I should have. I didn't stop him when he spoke honestly about what he felt. I didn't encourage him, but I didn't shut it down either. And in that hesitation, I crossed a line I had sworn I never would. Nothing happened then, but something changed irrevocably. I realized with a sinking certainty that resisting him was no longer the only battle. I was now resisting myself. I had convinced myself that as long as nothing physical happened, I could still undo the damage. That belief shattered the day circumstances removed every excuse I had been hiding behind. It wasn't planned. There was no secret invitation or reckless decision made in advance. It was an ordinary situation that became dangerous only because of what already existed between us. An empty house. Time that stretched longer than expected. Silence that felt charged instead of calm. We tried to behave normally at first. We spoke about practical things, about schedules and responsibilities, clinging to routine as if it could protect us. But the tension was undeniable. It sat between us, heavy and unspoken, demanding to be acknowledged. I could feel it in the way my thoughts kept drifting, in the way my chest felt tight even though nothing was happening. Every instinct told me to leave. Every moral lesson I had ever lived by was urging me to walk away. He broke first. Not with touch, not with words of desire, but with honesty. He said he was tired of pretending nothing was there. He said carrying it silently was tearing him apart. He didn't ask for anything. That was the most dangerous part. He simply told me how he felt, openly, without expectation. I should have shut it down immediately. I should have reminded him of consequences, of family, of how much would be destroyed. Instead, I stood there listening, absorbing words that should never have been spoken to me, and that moment, I realized the choice was no longer theoretical. It was immediate. Stay or leave. Silence or confession. Strength or weakness. I told myself I needed a moment, just a moment to breathe, to gather my thoughts. But moments stretch when you don't move. He looked at me, waiting for rejection, bracing himself for it. When I didn't give it right away, something irreversible happened. I wish I could say it was passion that overcame me. That would at least make it sound honest. The truth is uglier. It was exhaustion. Loneliness. The temptation to feel seen without fighting for it. I crossed the line not with urgency, but with resignation. As soon as it happened, I knew it was a mistake. Not later. Not after reflection. Immediately. The weight of it settled on me before I could even process what I had done. There was no satisfaction, only shock. No sense of fulfillment, only a hollow quiet that followed. I couldn't look at him the same way, and I couldn't look at myself at all. The silence afterward was suffocating. He seemed shaken too, as if he had expected relief and found something far heavier instead. Whatever fantasy had existed dissolved instantly, replaced by fear and regret. I pulled away first. I told him this could never happen again. I said it had been wrong, that it could not exist beyond this moment. He didn't argue. That hurt more than I expected. His agreement felt like confirmation of what I already knew. That we had both lost something we couldn't name. Trust, perhaps. Or innocence. As I left, I felt older than I ever had before. Not because of age, but because of the knowledge I now carried. I had crossed a boundary I once believed defined who I was. And no matter how carefully we tried to bury it, I knew this moment would follow me. Some mistakes end quickly. Others move in quietly and refuse to leave. Time did not soften what happened. If anything, it sharpened it. Days passed, then weeks, and the world continued as if nothing had changed. My daughter laughed, spoke about plans, trusted us both without hesitation. Each word she spoke felt like a reminder of what I had done behind her back. I smiled when required, nodded when spoken to, and carried the weight of my silence everywhere I went. The fear of being discovered was constant, but it was not the worst part. The worst part was knowing I deserved that fear. He changed after that. Not dramatically, not in ways others could easily see. He became distant, overly cautious, almost formal. He avoided being alone with me at all costs. When our paths crossed, his eyes held something broken, something heavy with remorse. I had expected awkwardness, maybe even denial. Instead, I saw guilt reflected back at me, and it made everything harder. There was no comfort in knowing I wasn't alone in regret, that I tried to justify what I had done by telling myself it would never happen again. I told myself one mistake did not define an entire life. But those thoughts rang hollow. I was defined by it every time I looked at my daughter. Every time she spoke about her marriage with pride. Every time she reached for my hand, trusting me the way only a child trusts a parent. Love, once fractured, does not heal quietly. I considered confessing more times than I can count. Each time I imagined the aftermath, the devastation, the irreversible damage, the way my daughter's world would collapse in an instant. I told myself that silence was the lesser evil, that sparing her the truth was an act of protection. But deep down, I knew it was also self-preservation. I was not brave enough to face the consequences of honesty. What haunts me is not just what happened, but what it revealed about me. I had always believed my values were unshakable, that age and experience made a person stronger, not weaker. I was wrong. Weakness does not disappear with time. It waits for the right moment, for the right excuse. And when it finds both, it tests everything you think you are. I live carefully now. I measure my words. I keep my distance. I play my role convincingly. To everyone else, I am unchanged. Inside, I am constantly negotiating with guilt. Some nights sleep comes easily. Others, it doesn't come at all. Regret has a way of resurfacing when the world is quiet. I don't seek forgiveness, because I don't believe I deserve it. I don't expect understanding because I barely understand myself. This is not a story about desire or romance. It is a story about consequence, about how a single choice can echo for years, shaping the way you see yourself long after everyone else has forgotten. He made his desire clear, and I failed the test that followed. I carry that failure with me every day. Some mistakes end relationships, others end illusions. This one did both.